Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here on Sunday, February 16th. Don't normally have a lot of off-season Sunday videos for y'all, but the Jaguars announced their finalists for their general manager job. There are 5 finalists. We're going to talk about the Jaguars GM search, the finalists, everything going on surrounding the Jaguars general manager search here. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. You can also check out GenJag.com/shop, pick up some new Duval gear. So, Jacksonville Jaguars have done all of their Zoom interviews with all the candidates that they wanted to interview for the general manager job, outside of Mike Greenberg, who removed himself from the Jaguars search, right? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers assistant GM, who is really, he's been focused on the cap side of things, the business side of things, not a scout in essence, but there's a number of names the Jaguars did interview. It was an expansive search. There's no question about it. Folks that are not moving on to the final round of interviews are Los Angeles Chargers assistant general manager Chad Alexander, somebody who I'm very fond of, somebody who I think is poised for a general manager job very soon in the future. Las Vegas Raiders assistant GM Champ Kelly, former Tennessee Titans general manager John Robinson, who was the only retread interview and quite frankly was a little bit of a puzzling one. John Robinson is the man who helped build the Philadelphia Eagles, and he did not work for the Philadelphia Eagles. He worked for the Titans. He traded A.J. Brown to Philly, and outside of his first draft class, he really kind of struggled to put together strong overall classes. So that was an interesting one. But you also had New York Giants assistant general manager Brandon Brown, somebody who is well-revered, well-liked, well-regarded, but the Giants' track record over the last couple of years of decision-making from a personnel standpoint led me to have a little bit of pause when it came to Brandon Brown, right? And I know not everything's his fault that happens. He doesn't make the decisions as the assistant GM. The GM, Joe Shane, makes the final decisions there. Ownership obviously involved as well, and the head coach. But being a part of a team that let go of Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney a year after paying, Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones, that's a tough look. That's a really tough look for me, and it's hard for me to get past that. Buffalo Bills director of player personnel Terrence Gray, I thought that he was a strong candidate. Cincinnati Bengals senior personnel executive Trey Brown, who I also thought was a strong candidate. Really, for me, the only outlier that kind of really didn't make sense was Titans general manager John Robinson. Everybody else here on this list is somebody who has a reputation as an up-and-coming executive in the league, somebody who should be in line for a general manager job at some point in the near future. Now, those are the folks that the Jaguars interviewed via Zoom that are not moving on to the final round of interviews. And the final round of interviews are scheduled to take place Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, according to my source in the building. And obviously, Albert Breer also tweeted that out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this upcoming week. And then a decision will be made prior to the Jaguars leaving for the Combine, and the Combine begins on Monday. So the Jaguars will have their general manager in place before the Combine. The list of finalists for this job: Chicago Bears assistant GM Ian Cunningham, Los Angeles Rams director of scouting strategy James Gladstone, Green Bay Packers Vice President of Player Personnel John Eric Sullivan, Jaguars interim general manager Ethan Waugh, and San Francisco 49ers Director of Scouting and Football Operations Josh Williams. Very interesting that 2 of the finalists come directly from the Trent Baalke general management tree. Very interesting. And Josh Williams was actually hired in Trent Baalke's first year as the GM in San Francisco. Obviously has had a lot of success and was able to stay on with that staff after Trent Baalke left. And the 49ers have been a pretty impressive organization when it comes to talent acquisition and roster building over the last almost decade since Trent Baalke has left San Francisco, right? And then you've also got Jaguars interim GM Ethan Waugh, who came over as the assistant GM under Trent Baalke from San Francisco, worked with Trent Baalke in San Francisco for quite a while. And Ethan Waugh has been part of this search. He was the assistant GM prior to being named interim GM, and he is the internal candidate that they feel is a legitimate finalist for this job. The Jaguars really like Ethan Waugh. He's been kind of tasked with, during his job as assistant GM in Jacksonville, improving processes. And I think that you have seen a lot go right for the Jaguars in the draft over the last couple years since Ethan Waugh has been here in Jacksonville. The free agent class from 2024, I should say, a little bit disappointing overall. Bringing in some guys that didn't have the greatest amount of success. I do think the one, well, you could look at Mitch Morse and say that was a good signing for sure. That was an upgrade at center the Jaguars needed. I also think, getting Eric Armstead in the right spot in 2025 will be critical to kind of evaluating that class. But Gabe Davis, Ronald Darby didn't have great years for the Jaguars, to say the least. But Ethan Waugh, a legitimate candidate for the job. The top three names for me in this search now at this point, because Chad Alexander was one of my guys, but Ian Cunningham and James Gladstone were the top three for me. With Chad Alexander, you now also added Packers VP of Player Personnel John Eric Sullivan, who was kind of a late addition to the Jaguars interviews, somebody that was reported later on in the week. And I think all three of these are extremely strong candidates. Ian Cunningham, one of the most well-regarded general manager candidates in football this year. He interviewed a lot of different places, and his background is pretty darn impressive overall. You look at the places he's been. Baltimore for 9 years. Philadelphia for 5 years. And then he gets the job as the assistant general manager with the Chicago Bears. And I think that they've done a good job managing that roster overall since he's been there. Tough division. They have not had the steadiest hand at quarterback because you went from Justin Fields to the rookie Caleb Williams. I think that overall, Ian Cunningham having a background as an offensive lineman, I think that would be interesting, having Tony Baselli, EVP, Hall of Fame offensive lineman. Liam Cohen, who has consistently talked about the offensive line and getting them coached up and improving the personnel there, and then also adding a former offensive lineman. Ian Cunningham, very well regarded. My personal favorite at this point, though, is Los Angeles Rams Director of Scouting Strategy, James Gladstone. And so he's been a process guy, a scouting strategy guy, but he also has a role in the Rams talent evaluation and scouting in the draft too. So he's not just kind of that process guy, the strategy guy. He's also a scout, right? So, and you listen to him talk, you look at the way the Rams have put together different iterations of that franchise under Sean McVay and Les Snead, and it's been incredibly impressive. And the way they flipped the defense in two off seasons, they added enough talent on the defensive side of the ball to be incredibly competitive. And the way they addressed it last year, feeling the need to go get Jared Verse and bring in Braden Fisk, and they were absolutely on the money with that. Two guys I loved, by the way, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk from Florida State. Hearing him talk about the way they valued them together and looking at how they have drafted and added talent over the last few years, and even dating back to early days of Les Snead and Sean McVay there together, I think it's been really impressive. And James Gladstone obviously has a relationship with Liam Cohen, professional relationship. They worked together in Los Angeles for quite a while. So that would be my personal favorite. But I think John Eric Sullivan is definitely, for me, again, with Ian Cunningham and James Gladstone, in the top three. You look at what he's done. Been with the Packers for a very, very long time. Dating back to, 2008 with the Packers. But he's had his last 4 years, last 2 years, he's been the vice president of player personnel. So, top player personnel when it comes to NFL scouting and college scouting, right under the GM there. 4 years as the co-director of player personnel. So he's been close to the top of that organization, and they've built a lot of talent there. They've had successful draft classes. They've added talent throughout the draft and in free agency. Somebody that I think obviously has a very good track record, comes from an organization that I feel strongly about in Green Bay. And I think that's one thing you can say about each and every one of the external finalists. San Francisco 49ers, Josh Williams, great organization. Green Bay Packers, John Eric Sullivan, great organization. Los Angeles Rams, James Gladstone, great organization. Chicago Bears, I think that they're an organization heading in the right direction as well. So you look at all the backgrounds, the resumes, these are strong candidates. And I think the Jaguars have been looking, generally speaking, in the right places for this GM job. Now, again, the kind of timeline here: Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, in-person interviews with these guys, and then you're going to have a decision maybe Friday, but certainly by the time the Jaguars head to the combine on Monday. So they will have their GM in place when they head to the combine. And I've seen some kind of negativity about how long this search has taken, or the timeline with it. This has been the Jaguars' plan all along, whether you think it's a good plan or a poor plan. Ever since they moved on from Trent Baalke, this has kind of been the timeline for them. And to me, free agency starts March 10th, right? That's almost a month from now. I think each one of these general manager candidates has probably been doing some research on their own in that regard, and the Jaguars have a full scouting staff in place, both pro and college. So it's not like this group is going to have no idea what's going on. If you can't get your ducks in a row in 3 weeks of preparation for free agency, I don't know what you're doing. But legal tampering period kicks off March 10th. I think that's plenty of time to figure out the plan moving forward. And I'm sure the plans have already been starting to have been discussed between the Jaguars and these general manager candidates. And then the draft isn't until April 24th. I mean, you've got over 2 months to get ready for that. So I view this as plenty of time to get your ducks in a row. And I think if you can't figure out your free agency plan in 3 weeks, you're probably not going to figure out at all. And if you can't get the draft ready to go in 2 months when you have the scouting staff in place, you have personally, the GMs have been doing their work on this draft as well. I think there's no reason to not be able to get a strong plan in place in 2 months for the draft and figure out free agency, in the next 3 weeks or so. I don't know how that timeline really is an issue for fans, but that's what the Jaguars are doing. And I think that they've got a really solid group of general manager candidates. Excited to see how it ends up playing out here over the next week or so. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.